Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. If you don't know me, my name is Stephanie Wanamaker. I'm the program director of the psychology program. And Dena is going to be presenting a discussion on navigating change in higher education. So originally we had Dr. Todd Thomas. He was our original speaker. He has not been able to join us because of some health concerns. So if you can, please keep him in your prayers. Dena so graciously stepped in to share this great information with you, and she has done a lot of research and has a lot of knowledge on this topic. So that with that being said, I am so happy to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Dena Counts. Dr. Dena Counts is an associate professor, assistant dean, and program director for two programs, the BS in Organizational Communication and the BS in Organizational Leadership. Dena received her bachelor's degree and master's degree in communication from ACU, as well as her doctorate degree in organizational leadership. After working in the field of fundraising, consulting, training, and human resources, Dena returned to ACU Abilene in 2008, where she served as also an instructor in communication, speech, and debate coach, and speaking center director. In 2020, she transitioned to ACU Online, and Dena has research focuses on organizational change and its impact on its employees. Dena has been married to Jim, her husband, for 30 years and has two children, Emily and Natalie, and a son-in-law, Parker. Dena's aim in life is to serve and bless others. So there's a couple of announcements I wanted to make before we get started. So if you have any questions, feel free to add them throughout in the chat, and you can unmute and ask them. But if you are feeling uncomfortable with asking those questions, you can always send either a Zoom chat or a Google chat to me to remain anonymous. I can't say that word today. Anonymity. Excuse me. So with that being said, I want to thank you again for joining us, and I will pass it off to you, Dena.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank y'all for coming. I so appreciate it. When Todd had to bow out because of some health issues he had, I was happy to join in. This is one of my topics of research, and I really enjoy talking about organizational change and how we can do it better, as well as in my dissertation when I got my EDD from ACU. I studied organizational change and its impacts on employees. So we'll be talking about that today, as well as some strategies on how to navigate change more effectively as a leader and as an employee that's impacted by change. So that's what we'll be doing today. Let me see. There we go. It's kind of funny. I think you guys went through this with me as well. Back in about like 2016, 2017, they started warning us about how in 2025, we were going to have an enrollment cliff at higher education because the number of 18-year-olds was going to dip hugely. And what would happen is that enrollment in higher education would take a nosedive, and we needed to start changing. And I know when I was at ACU Abilene during this time, we were talking about ways that we could change and be more effective and making decisions on how to approach that enrollment cliff. Well, unfortunately, 2020 happened and the COVID pandemic hit, and it forced change on higher education much more quickly than we had anticipated. Now, today, I serve in the dean's office, and I would like to say and acknowledge for all the people that are here that I understand that I come from a place of power in the organization, and some of you may not be comfortable asking questions or sharing some of your insights about organizational change, especially because we're recording it, right? So if you have questions that you want to send Stephanie through our Google chat, through our email, feel free to do that, and you can ask things, and it will be, she will keep your anonymity. Here, I'm having trouble with that word too, Stephanie. So feel free to do that, because I recognize with my position of power that people may be a little hesitant to say some things. All right, so let's talk about organizational change and some of the research in that area. I think you guys probably know that this topic is important. But one of the reasons for me the topic is important is we many times don't think about in organizational change how our our organization in higher education, the university structure, is set up as an interaction of individuals, then the different departments, and then the environment. And I'm not talking about trees and shrubs. I'm talking about how outside forces all impact how we work together in an organization and in a university. So when a change happens in one place in the university, it tends to have a domino effect to other places in the university, affecting individuals, the departments, things of that nature. And obviously, I think this is kind of a, yeah, duh, Dena, but there's a relationship between organizational change and the impacts that it has on our humans. And I think sometimes in our current environment, where we are feeling pressure to change and be much more competitive in higher education, we can be in such a hurry to impact change, we don't think about the human impacts and how we can navigate those human impacts of change. So when there are negative interactions and all of those systems within a university, you have employees that will experience dissatisfaction. They'll have emotional stressors and physical stressors. Turnover will happen. You'll get that quiet quitting that has been in the media. Absenteeism increases. And I think what many times leaders don't understand is that if they don't help their employees navigate that change, then you're going to see an economic problem in the long run, because turnover costs the organization money. So in my mind, it's yeah, this topic is important to understand and to learn how to do well. So let's talk about change in higher education. There are several types of change that you've probably experienced. I know I've experienced. It can range from like fine tuning to processes. Like we change how we do the change of grade form, and that's an organizational change. But it can be much larger, like downsizing, an elimination of departments. Maybe your boss changes. That's a type of organizational change. Maybe your organization, your university starts offering a new service. Again, that's organizational change. Installation of new ways of doing this systems, and revolutionary change can also happen in an organization where the mission of an organization changes. So in your chat, during your time in higher education, what kind of changes have you experienced? So feel free to pop those in the chat, and Stephanie will share some of those. But what in your time in education, some of you have a long time, some of you have a shorter time. What are some experiences you've you've experienced?
Joe says downsizing.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Says new programs.
Yeah.
Dr. Maxwell says more to online and remote work. Aline says new team structures.
Yeah. And I don't think your answer is unusual. I think almost every university is experiencing some of these. Did we have a new one, Steph?
Yes, Dr. Pap says organizational philosophy shifts. And John says assigned out of the blue to new position with much greater responsibility.
Yeah, that's always fun to receive that email. Out of the blue, your job description has changed, and we have added this, this, and this with no agreement on your part. So changes are happening, and they can be difficult. And we'll talk about today how to navigate some of those. I think we had one more added, did we, Steph?
We did. I was waiting for you. Brandy said voluntold positions. Ha.
Yeah, voluntold, yeah. So in the literature, and I admittedly would tell you that the types of organization change, the labels that our research uses has changed over time. So that's kind of funny. The labels have changed to organizational change. You know, so you'll read the literature and you won't always see these types of labels, but the ones I'm going to use today are planned change. And this is not uncommon in the literature. These are changes that, okay, we've made a plan. We are going through phases. We're going to do this first and this first. Those of you who are employees here at ACU Online, our change in college structure has been very much a planned change. We've seen the progression, and we have documents to show us how the progression will go. Now, typically, planned change in an organization is top down. It's led by the top, and people underneath are told. Emergent change comes from the bottom and goes up. And these are changes that kind of just emerge in our everyday work processes, and people start talking and going, hey, we should change this and we should do this, and it just emerges in the organization. Now, there are levels of change. For instance, there's first order change. This is typically emergent, and these are small changes. So like a change in a process of like our change of grade form, how to do the change of grade form differently. I have that on my mind right now because I have several I have to do because one of our instructors didn't fill out the grades in Banner. So I get to do lots of change of grade forms. Y'all feel my pain, don't you? But typically, emergent change is first order and they're minor changes. Second order change is typically top down, and these are again plan changes, but they're much more significant. Like our 3-college structure going to that's a second order change. It's much more major. But I want to talk real quickly about frequency of change because I have a feeling it has major impacts in a lot of our higher education organizations. So frequent change is change that occurs either one after another or several changes at once. The problem is that many times if we have change after change after change, people don't see those as singular events. Rather, they just loop them all together and they go, we're just having organizational change and it's all the same. When change occurs frequently, employees start to feel that change is never ending and unpredictable. I was reading in James yesterday, and it talks about when you ask for wisdom of the Lord, don't doubt, because if you doubt, you'll feel like you're on waves of the sea going back and forth, being in tumult. And I think that's what happens with people, with employees, when they feel like there's change that's never ending. They feel like they're on those waves that just we're going back and forth and things are so unpredictable. Another thing that impacts how we receive and navigate change is if you feel like you're a change recipient. Now, this is different than a stakeholder. A stakeholder in the literature is someone that may receive change, but they're a stakeholder. They've had a say in the change. But I think there may be so much change happening in higher education institutions right now that many employees feel like they're change recipients. These are people who are impacted by the change and the consequences, but really don't feel like they have a say in it. You have to remember what I talked about earlier, that since we have subsystems in higher education, like we have here at ACU Online, we have the instructional design department, we have the people that do the recruiting, we have the people that are student service advisors. And what we have to remember is that change is typically a domino effect, especially that second order change within an organization. So what happens is if they make a change in that department, it affects academics. So what happens is people commonly feel like change recipients because they didn't have any say in that. I already mentioned what are some subsystems in higher education. I answered my own question, so y'all don't get to answer that one. But another thing that impacts, and I think specifically in Christian higher education institutions, is something called organizational identification. Now, this is not how the organization identifies themselves and says who they are. This is a psychological state, and Stephanie, you probably get this, you've studied this. This is a psychological state where an employee defines themselves with the same attributes that the organization has. And there's not much distinction between the two. So what happens is the employee self-defines themselves with the same attributes as the organization. And what happens is there's a boundary that becomes blurred between the two. Research shows that if employees have high organizational identification with the organization, they tend to do lots of work. They tend to be great cheerleaders for the organization. They tend to be great employees. What happens, though, if imposed change happens, employees tend to have less organizational identification, and you also see that they're less open to change. So on one hand, you want employees to have organizational identification, but you probably can see how that can be unhealthy sometimes, but we have to think of it when we consider organizational change. I think this is especially important in Christian organizations. I don't know about y'all, but one of the reasons I work at ACU is they align pretty much with my values, that Jesus is supreme, that our lives are revolving around being gracious and merciful to people and loving and kind. But what do you think could be, and you can answer the question in the chat, what are the dangers of high organizational identification for an employee in a Christian organization? And put your answers in the chat if you would. Nobody's helping me out here, huh? I think there's probably some stressors when the organization goes a different way than you would agree with. Then there's probably some stressors right now. We're having some conversations at ACU about sexual stewardship policy. And some people agree, some people disagree, but I wonder how that's impacting organizational identification. All right, somebody did help me out and said something in the chat. Stephanie, what did they say?
They have a couple comments here, perhaps forsaking local community/church, and one might become myopic in thinking and might lose some flexibility.
Yeah. I think we had another one just pop up. Did you already say that one, Steph?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah, I do think those could be two problems that, if I, as a Christian, think my organization is fully Christian, I believe everything that they do, but then I disagree with it, it could affect my relationship with the Lord. It can make me discouraged about that relationship. Did we have another answer there, Steph?
Yes, expectations do not match reality.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
feelings that the organization and the individual are going on different paths.
Yes, and that leads to that turnover, absenteeism, quiet quitting. All right, so there are other factors in the literature. There's been all kinds of research about factors that impact organizational change. So as an employee, these are factors that impact how successful a change is. These can be things like resistance to change. Y'all know people that are just naturally resistant to change. People feel lost or helpless. Stress, if they agree with the change or not, if they're open to change. Uncertainty, if they don't have a lot of information. There's lots of things. But I'm basically making the argument, and we're looking at these factors today, is that change recipients, if they feel like a change recipient, that affects how successful the change is. If they have organizational identification, that level of it affects the impacts and the success of change. If people have change fatigue, that's going to impact organizational change, whether it's emergent or planned, and then how frequent, how people feel if there's frequency of change going on. So those of you who work with me are just going to giggle probably a little bit. There are two things that actually help people navigate change. So if you're a leader and you want to help your employees navigate change, there's two things that have been proven by research to really help your employees. One is communication. I teach communication. I tend to talk too much. Maybe that's why I'm doing this presentation. But communication during change does tend to reduce cynicism and skepticism about the change. Also, multiple researchers have claimed that the most impactful determinant of whether that change will be successful is communication. Now, when I say communication, I'm not just talking about informing employees of what you're doing. That still leads to someone feeling like they're a change recipient. Rather, communication is about interaction. It's about listening, it's about talking, it's about asking questions. It takes time to really have a healthy communication environment. But the other thing that tends to help organizational change be more successful and helps the employee navigate it is job control. If an employee feels like they have control over their job and decision-making over their job, then they're going to feel more comfortable with organizational change and have less stress. So emergent change, asking your employees to tell me from the lower levels, what changes do we need to make to be successful? That emergent change gives more job control. But I will admit that many of our higher education institutions will tend to do planned change that is top down, that is not well communicated, where people don't feel like they have job control. And because we have so much change happening, one after another, a lot at the same time, change fatigue can happen. Now, what is change fatigue? It's the perception that change is never ending. And what the negative about frequent change and continuous change is, y'all would probably get this, is I have norms of how I do things. First thing I do in the morning is start answering emails. They control my work environment. But I also will go outside and tend to look outside and be in my garden for just a little bit to take a break. Then I'll come inside. I tend to have certain people that I interact with about certain topics. There is a rhythm to how I do my job. Well, what happens with change and change fatigue is people have to change their norms of how they do things. You change their comfort of how they do things. And what happens is we have an increase in stress because those work routines and their knowledge of, I know how to do this. And now suddenly they don't know how, and change fatigue happens. All right, so key symptoms of change fatigue: emotional exhaustion, cynicism increases, more conflict with coworkers as well as supervisors. You'll see a lot more gossip, reduced efficiency, and you'll see some counterproductive work behaviors. Absenteeism when people really aren't sick, but they're calling in sick, more anger, that quiet quitting, turnover. Did we have a question in our chat there, Stephanie? I'll pause for a moment.
We had a comment. Someone said change with, not change to.
Exactly. And that helps our job control. All right, so let me find out what kind of change fatigue that you are currently experiencing. Stephanie is dropping in the chat a Google form. Now, there is only one question, and we're not collecting emails, so you're anonymous. But we're going to try to see what kind of change fatigue you feel like you're going through right now. And you just saw the symptoms these are the symptoms that we saw for change fatigue. So take a minute, answer the questions, and we'll show the results. But while we're pausing after you did the question, what are some questions you've had about what we've covered so far? Anyone? Those of you are my age, you know Ferris Bueller. All right, Stephanie, when she gets a moment, is going to share with us the results.
Yeah, we still have some answers trickling in, but
Okay.
from what I have so far, we have 20% at number 1, 40% at 3. Oh, hold on. I'll give it a minute because it keeps changing.
It keeps changing. People keep answering the question.
Yeah, let me refresh it one more time. Okay, so we have 16.7% at level 1, 8.3% at level 2. It's changing again, sorry.
That's awesome. I'm glad people are answering the questions.
Yeah, I'll give it a couple more seconds and I'll repeat. All right, I think we're good now. We're at 15 responses. So, all right, level 1 is 20%. Level 2 is 6.7. Level 3 is 33.3%. Level 4 is 20%, and level 5 is 20%.
All right, so we have, just doing the math in my head, we have about 73% that are 3 and over. And 5 was, I have a lot of, I feel like I have a lot of change fatigue. What percentage was the 5? Is that 20?
20%.
Okay. So that's not unusual, unfortunately. Change is happening in lots of higher education institutions. People are doing their best to deal with this cliff that is coming in next year, 2025. I know here at ACU Online, we are growing. We're still probably operating in a startup mode. So lots of changes are happening. But the result is some of us are really dealing with change fatigue. And that fatigue can be exhausting. All right, so let me share with you some ways to deal with that fatigue and to manage how you navigate through change. You know, we are spending a little bit of time in this presentation giving leaders, because many of you are leaders, of how to help your employees navigate change. But our focus for this presentation was really on how do we help our employees navigate change when planned change happens, when they feel like they're change recipients, and they have a higher amount of change fatigue. So Bridges transition model is a model of change management, but it's about how to help the employees navigate change. And this husband and wife duo, they say, really when change happens, there's this ending thing, because what happens is the way we've been doing things ends. And in that, it's not unusual to find employees are shocked or angry. Maybe they're in denial. It's almost like someone has died and you have this feeling of loss. There's a loss of, well, this is how we used to do it. It's like your grandpa telling you he walked barefoot in the snow uphill every day for school. But these are the ways we used to do things, and there's grieving in that. Now, some people take a little while to go through that ending stage. They need that psychological time to process it. But then the neutral zone happens. And in the neutral zone, this is when people are going, all right, I got to buckle up. It's time for me to figure out how to do things this new way. But there's still some confusion and disorientation. People get frustrated because, like, I thought this was the way how to do it, and now I'm not sure how to do it. People can get apathetic and skeptical. The cynicism can happen. Well, I'm not sure this is going to work. You've heard people say that. And the emotion in that neutral zone is still real, and people are still trying to figure out how to navigate it. Now, again, people may stay in this zone for a little while before they move to the next stage. There are others, though, that will move through it very quickly. So as I'm talking to my coworkers, I need to understand that people will be in different stages in this and help them process the emotion of it. The last stage is new beginnings, and this is when people start getting excited and energized and committed, and they're like, okay, we can do this the new way. This reminds me of our transition to the 3 colleges that we're doing here at ACU Online. I think, again, I may not have all full information, that we've gone pretty quickly through endings and neutral zone, and we're getting out of that neutral zone into new beginnings as an organization, excited about the 3 colleges and what it will bring. But there is some grieving. There is some, oh no, how are we going to do this? I get questions quite a bit about, do I talk to the interim dean or do I talk to you about this topic? So there is some confusion. We're still somewhat in that neutral zone. All right, so here's some personal strategies for managing change. One is mindfulness, and I'm going to tweak mindfulness a little bit because those of you who know me know that I'm a big champion of going to the Lord when there's problems. But mindfulness is really about being fully present and engaged in the moment. I have to make sure that, and I have struggled with this in the past, of going, okay, I am sad, I am angry. I just don't want to stay there, but it's okay to open up that emotion and to talk about it and process it. And where are your thoughts and feelings without being judgmental of yourself? Help mitigate your stress and anxiety that can come with change by calming yourself, reminding yourself where you still have control, talking to friends and family so they can remind you that maybe the narrow way of your thinking is not exactly true. But give yourself time to experience the emotion and understand it, because you don't want to stay there. Those of you that are here with us, what are some ideas that you have used, maybe mindful strategies, to help you experience the emotion and process that? If you would share some of your strategies in the chat. Because I know I have some psych people on this thing. I've already seen you, so you know how to do this.
We have a response. Talk about it with close friends.
Oh, yeah.
Talk it out with friends and trusted colleagues.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people in that are faculty members are thinkers, that if you're like me, you're in your head a lot. And sometimes I need to get those thoughts out and talk with somebody. That's really great.
It says list of positive outcomes and remind myself what is within my control and what is not.
Amen.
Exercise as well. I'll add to that exercise and self-care.
Mm-hmm. That's when why sometimes I have to walk in my backyard just to get my mind off of what I'm thinking.
And prayer was also added too.
Amen. Oh my goodness, y'all are just popping in. Now you got all kinds of ideas. I see you, Brandy.
Slammed laptop shut. I like to ask myself, what would it feel like if X for me and for others?
Exactly. All right. Here are some other exercises that we have mentioned, some we haven't. I have to daily have prayer and sit with the Lord on things. Maybe start or end your day with 10 minutes of prayer. And I try to recognize the emotion and tell the Lord what emotions I have. And I really try to ask, what's behind that? Have I have fear that's behind that? Is it because I really want to control things and I'm not wanting to give up the control? I really ask the Lord what's behind that and what does he want to heal in me? Mindful breathing, pausing, focusing after you shut your laptop shut. Why are you feeling that way? Clearing your mind, taking a walk. I have to during lunch. It's really easy for me just to work through lunch because I'm getting things done. But then I'll hit a barrier and I have to get out and just walk for a moment and get away from that laptop. I think we have some other ideas that popped up in the chat. What are those, Steph?
Music and 5-7-8 breathing is amazing.
Oh, cool. Can somebody, whoever said 5-7-8 breathing, can y'all explain that?
My
Brandy.
gosh, no. I mean, you can Google it, but basically, like breathing in for a count of 5, holding for 7, and then out 8, like in through the nose, out through your mouth.
Amen. Thank
The
you,
Navy
Brandy.
SEALs use it, so
There you go. Approved by the Navy SEALs.
yeah,
And they could go through a lot of stress.
yeah.
Thank you, Brandy. The benefits of all these things is we want to reduce the stress and increase our resilience because we can't control the changes that happen. We can't say you need to stop this change, you need to stop that change. What we can control is our reactions to it. And anything we can do to help lower that stress we want to do. Did we have any more, Steph?
No, no more comments.
Okay, great. All right, here's some personal strategies as well. Draw boundaries. You know, you're going to probably have to get away and say, okay, in my job, I need to draw this boundary and this limit and think about reasonable and safe ways for you to work and reasonable, safe ways for others to react to you and interact with you and make plans for what you will do if they step over that boundary. My husband and I tried, we did it occasionally in parenting, did it well, and a lot of times we messed up, but we tried to make a plan. If our daughter does this, then this is this is a healthy reaction for us. And we tried to think through those things. Boundaries are the same thing. How can you draw boundaries in your work about what you will and what you won't do, what's in your job description, what's more than, and how are you going to deal with those things in an effective way? So this is relevant to change because we really need to have a work-life balance. Work is not life. We've got to prevent burnout, especially during periods of intense change. I know at ACU Online, I think a lot of us feel like we're going through a period of intense change, but we've got to prevent burnout. It's not what the Lord would want. It's probably not what ACU Online would want, I hope. I don't think so. So we've got to make sure we draw those boundaries and we're healthy in that regard. All right, so here's some strategies for creating boundaries. Clear communication. Be clear about your availability and capacity. I make sure that on my calendar, so if you see a 12-to-1 line on my daily calendar, it's because I make sure I block out a time for lunch. And it's not necessarily because I love to eat, which I do, but it's also because I know I need to get away from my computer so that I can just have some downtime and de-stress if need be. So make digital boundaries for yourself. Are there things that stress you out you need to stay away from? Whether it's bad movies or a committee that you need to resign from, because drawing those boundaries are important. Learn to say no. Now, the benefits for you as an academic is you'll have more focus, you'll have a better personal well-being. And I think for me, I just need to slow my mind down, and boundaries help me do that. So we would encourage you to use these tools and frameworks that we've given you today to think about how you think about change and how you handle it. Give others, you've got employees who you work with, give them guidance and coaching on mindfulness and boundaries and help them navigate the change. Even though we want to recognize the emotions, we don't want to stay there in anger or frustration or cynicism. How can we work out of that into the final stage of the model that we looked at? And support one another through transitions, fostering resilience and innovation. All right, so does anybody have any questions or comments they want to make? Feel free to put them in the chat or to just open up your mic and talk in the meeting. Y'all are so stunned from the awesomeness of this presentation that no one's talking. All righty. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you being here today. To Stephanie, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Like Dena said, thank you all so much for being here. We're so happy to have you. Please remember to join us for FDI Summer 2. It's the first Thursday of the term at noon. Dr. Yeager and Dr. Shaw will be engaging us in a conversation on navigating relationships in teams. So thank you all again. And Dena, you have a lot of thank you, Dena. Timely presentation, great presentation, timely words. You've done an amazing job. So thank you, Dena.
Thanks, friends. Thanks, y'all, for coming. Y'all have a great day.